Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Ezekiel 30 and 31. Now, Ezekiel 30 is dated, Ezekiel is very specific when it was dated, the 29th of April in 587 BC. And it's a lament, it's a sad prophecy about the demise of Egypt. And then 2 months later, he talks specifically about Pharaoh. And he gives another lament saying, oh, it's going to be terrible what's going to happen to Egypt. So this is what he says. A sword will come against Egypt, this is verse 4, and anguish will come against Cush. Then they will know that I am the Lord when I set fire to Egypt and her helpers are crushed. To the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, verse 10 says. So he says exactly who's coming against them. He says that Egypt's going to be judged by Nebuchadnezzar. He and his army, the most ruthless of nations, will be brought in to destroy the land. And this is what he says, I will destroy their idols and I will put an end to the image of Memphis. And so he's basically saying, and he says it this way, he says, I've broken the arm of Pharaoh. He's already done that once when Nebuchadnezzar came up against him. And then when Pharaoh tries to, taunt Nebuchadnezzar and come up against Nebuchadnezzar again, flex his muscle, he says, I'm going to break the other arm. He says, and not only am I going to break both Pharaoh's arms, I'm going to strengthen the arm of Nebuchadnezzar, and that is going to be the end of Egypt. And I will disperse the Egyptians, he says in verse 26, to all the countries around them, and then they'll know that I'm the Lord. Now, in the next chapter, chapter 26, he turns his attention to Pharaoh. And he compares Pharaoh to a majestic tree in a forest. Now, I'm standing here on a very windy day. These trees, the image doesn't give it its justice, but they are massive. I think these trees must be more than 12 meters high. And some of them around this forest have fallen over. And this is what he says. He says, you, Pharaoh, were majestic in beauty. And you were like a tree that spread its boughs, and its roots went down into abundant waters. The cedars of the garden of God could not rival it. He says, you were magnificent, you were splendid, you were like a tree towering over every other tree in the forest. Look at some of these trees next to me here. They are absolutely magnificent. And he says, Pharaoh's like one of these. And then he says, and because of the fact that he was proud of his height, pride is the issue that God's dealing with Pharaoh. He says, I gave it into the hands of other nations. All the nations of the earth came from under its shade and left it. It's like birds used to hang around in you. Other nations would hide under you like Israel tried to. And he says, I'm taking you to the ground and you're not going to be this stately tree in the nations of the world. When I read God's heart toward Pharaoh, I'm reminded of James chapter 4 that says God opposes the proud. Now, just imagine God opposing you, putting his hand against you, saying, you're proud, I'm going to oppose you. It's not like God's not listening to you. He's standing against you. I oppose the proud and give grace to the humble. In other words, James is saying there in James 4, God lifts up those who are humble. He equips them. They don't deserve it, but he helps them. He takes these high, arrogant, proud, boastful trees and he puts them to the ground. And he takes the little ones and those who humble themselves before him, and he gives them inordinate grace and favor. I don't know about you, but when I read this sort of stuff, my heart immediately goes toward God, and I say, Lord, search my heart. Search me. I don't want to be found among the high trees that God says, I'm going to put my hand against you. Now, I would rather be found among the lowly, that God says, I'm going to help you. I'm going to equip you. If you have any hint at the moment that you've been walking with swagger and proudful of your achievement, I trust that you're going to do what I'm going to do in the next few minutes and say, Lord, I humble myself before you. You don't want God to humble you. You want to humble yourself before his mighty hand.